free the land.
Free the land.
By any means necessary. I should also say, in the spirit of my brother Ahmed Rahman, I'll say, what's up, black man? And what's up, black woman? Okay, well, you can say what's up, black man, but we're going to be inclusive today. How's everybody doing?
Fine.
I'm honored to be here at the Wright again. I'm also honored to share this platform with Brother Sundiata, who, believe it or not, we've known each other since we were 18. No, 21. 21, we were both thin with big afros. And I'm also honored to be on the stage with someone I consider a powerful legend. She probably wouldn't take that, but Sister Melba, who's a leader in terms of academics, but as well as art. And of course, but I wanted to ask, how many people were here in Detroit during the 1967 rebellion? How many people in the audience, show me your hands, have memories? Okay, a good portion of the audience. Now, of course, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, really Compton. Okay, somebody raised their hand on that. Today I was on the phone with another son of Detroit, Michael Samanga, who's on our faculty at Georgia State University. And he told me that, oh, I said, I'm in your hometown. He said, well, man, you were in the Mecca, Detroit. And I said, man, I can't really argue with that. You know, sometimes you want to rep the city, but I know just looking at the history of Detroit, that there's a powerful legacy here. But I have to say, being 11 years old when the Watts uprising occurred, that was one of the most powerful events in my life. And why would I say it was powerful? It was powerful because from an 11-year-old's perspective, it showed the capacity of black people to stop some stuff. I want to say something else. To stop stuff from happening. It kind of changed the course of events for not only people in Los Angeles, but I think black people across the country. As Sundiata said, from that year on, really in 66, 67, every time I watched the news, particularly in the summertime, it would be what? The long, hot summer. The news would lead with that and the rebellions that were going on in different parts of the country during that particular time, including what happened here in Detroit in 1967. And what are the patterns that we see from those activities? One, we generally see a seminal event, right? It was something, some act of police terrorism in our community would start an event, would start an uprising, start some resistance. Number two, it would usually come from working class and poor people. And oftentimes even street organizations, what we call gangs, would be very much involved in this resistance that would happen in our communities. This is why Dr. King said what? The violence was the language of the unheard, right? He said that, and we all have to think about that for a minute. He's saying that these are people who aren't a part of any organizations. Oftentimes there are people who don't have any other way to express what they're feeling. And even for those of us who say we're revolutionaries, right? We have to, even though we might feel we're articulating for the masses of our people, the rebellion might be in a way a critique that we haven't organized our people, right? Because even the Panthers in certain cases were in the streets trying to keep people from engaging in this spontaneous rebellion, right? Even in Oakland and other places, they would talk to people in the streets and try to get them to go back home. So it's showing that there's a large sector of our people out there that haven't been organized, right, and can engage in what might be more sophisticated strategies. Because we could say on one hand that the rebellions kind of represent something that draws attention to our communities, right? That's very powerful, but on the other hand, we could actually do more targeted action. Finally, I would say that rebellions are symbols of resistance for our people. The last time I was here was on a panel on Robert Williams, and Robert Williams said after Watts in '65, and he's saying this from Cuba, on a radio broadcast from Radio Free Dixie. He said, "This is the beginning of a furious and devastating firestorm. We're living in an age of revolution," and he called upon people to resist, resist, resist. That's an example of how groups like the Revolutionary Action Movement during that time and other groups saw the White uprising. They saw it as a form of inspiration. And as Sundiata mentioned in his presentation, it propelled, these spontaneous uprisings will propel more radical leadership in our communities. What happened in Detroit? There was a publication during the Detroit Rebellion in 1967, a publication, a newsletter. It's mimeographed, you can get it online, called Black Power. And Black Power, they said, the Black America showed the world in the Battle of Detroit that Black people can and will take what's rightfully ours. So they become like these symbols of resistance. So even me, who wasn't here in '67, when I think of Detroit, I always think of this uprising and what it meant to people and what they mean to people around the world. Now, Sundiata mentioned that even prior to Watts, that Birmingham was an example. And when we talk about the history of Birmingham, no one thinks about the spontaneous uprising that occurred there, particularly after bombings had gone on in Birmingham, and no one seemed to be able to answer these bombings that were going on in the Black community. Now, I wrote about another case the following year, a place called Macomb, Mississippi. Macomb, Mississippi is in the southern part of the state. It's an urban center for Mississippi. It's not Detroit, right? But for Mississippi, it's an urban center, right? And because of voting rights campaigns and because of what happened in 1964 during Freedom Summer with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and the initiatives that, the freedom movement was taking at that particular time, white supremacists began to organize and redouble their efforts to put down the movement. So in 1964, in the summer, there were 12 bombings of homes, churches, and businesses between June 22nd and August the 12th. In fact, during that time, we always call Birmingham Bombingham, but during that particular summer, Macomb, Mississippi was known as the bombing capital of the world. And again, these bombings were initiated by a group called the United Klans of America. Again, in response to efforts for the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and other organizations that were initiated, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Council of Federated Organizations, their voter registration campaigns, okay? And in spite of this Klan organization doing the bombing, who did local and state police blame? They blame the movement. They said that either this actions toward voting rights and desegregation had made a situation that created people wanting to bomb because they were changing their way of life, or that Black folks were bombing these places themselves, and just to try to get media attention. Well, we say the local and state police, they might be with the Klan anyway, so they weren't doing anything. But the FBI, we know they did something, right? We seen Mississippi burning. We know the FBI was there to defend the rights of Black people. Well, while this bombing campaign was going on, the FBI actually decreased its contingent in Macomb, the city of Macomb. They had 16, but in the midst of all this bombing, they took their contingent of agents down to 4 people. So what does that kind of show the black community? And so this bombing is going on, and the objective of the bombing is what? To terrorize black people, to intimidate them from participating in voter rights activity. But as one SNCC member said, one local SNCC member said, fear turned into anger. It didn't work. He said that some of the black leadership, the middle class black leadership, the leaders of the NAACP on a local level, they went downtown and told the city leaders, somebody fitting to get killed, and then all of them gonna be black. That there's gonna be a response to this. And there was a response. On September 20th, 1964, the residence of a black female entrepreneur, Eileen Quinn, was bombed. Why did they target Eileen Quinn? Eileen Quinn owned a restaurant, and voter registration workers, people doing Freedom Summer, SNCC people, they could eat there for free. Okay? So when they bombed her house, and she was well respected in the community, 2 of her children were injured. When word got out in the community, it sparks a rebellion. Okay? People were already kind of armed in the community in face of these Klan attacks. Black people began to arm themselves and patrol their own community. But it went from that organized effort to them moving to the street, and they just tried to attack anything white they saw moving through the black community. Shooting, sniping at a white motorist. They also had Molotov cocktails, responded to destroying white-owned businesses in their communities. But they were finally calmed down by the COFO workers after hours of rebellion. But it was only after this black rebellion that you had some sort of response by someone in authority. The next day, 3 female leaders from Macomb were flown to Washington, D.C. The next day after the rebellion, on September 21st. Miss Quinn, whose house was bombed, another sister, Aura Bryant, there was an attempt to dynamite her house, but she shot the folk as they were getting away weeks before that, and another sister whose house had been bombed, Maddie Dillon. Now, not only were they flown to Washington, D.C., who did they have an audience with? President Johnson. LBJ, the same LBJ that Roger Wilkins said was about to call us the N-word in a meeting with black folk, right? And so, and meet with the president. The president in turn contacts the governor of Georgia. The governor of Georgia, I'm thinking about where I live and how they behave. The governor of Mississippi. The governor of Mississippi then meets with local officials. And within a week, they had arrested 11 Klansmen. But it was only after the Black Rebellion. Now, of course, I tell you, they arrested the Klansmen, they made some deals, they got convicted of 5 years, and really the judge then gave them probation because he said they were provoked. But this stopped the bombing. And it only stopped, again, after you have this black uprising. Why do I bring this up? Oftentimes when we have a black uprising, the official thing is to do what? Condemn them, right? Even some of us who are militants, right? We condemn the uprising, this resistance of our people, saying that what happens, the only thing that happens is black people burn their own communities. But here we see in some cases where, because the language of the unheard is expressed, and that anger is expressed, that black rebellion is expressed, that potential to disrupt. And as one who studies social movements, I'll tell you this, a movement is only successful if it has the capacity to disrupt. In fact, I would argue that black people will only get self-determination if we show the capacity to make ourselves ungovernable. Okay? The problem with a rebellion is, since it's unorganized, it's not sustainable, right? It can't bring about the level of resistance we can get to actually take control of institutions. And there's other forms, before everybody gets scared, there's other forms of disruptive activity. And I saw Mississippi, through boycotts, you can change a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
Our collective activity in terms of boycotts, other forms of civil disobedience. And of course there's armed resistance, but we're not going to encourage nobody to do that. Okay? You do that, you do it on your own, but protect yourself. So we have to begin to not condemn this rebellion that happens from the masses of our people, but to begin to actually organize our people, or really assist our people in organizing themselves so we can actually achieve power and self-determination. Thank you, and we're going to pass the mic to good sister Boyd. Free the line.